Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Robin Shuttborough, and I'm recording this in my garden between thundery rain showers 2 days before the coronation of our new king. I make no bones about this. I'm looking forward to the celebrations, the sense that the country is coming together, particularly at a time that is full of crises and miseries. And of course the excuse it gives us to share delicious food with our neighbours, who quite possibly we haven't really met since the last time we did this for the Queen's Jubilee. Now the Cotswolds has a very strong connection with royalty over the centuries. From the times of the kings of Mercia during the whole of the second half of the first millennium, all the way to the present day, the area has been a favourite piece of residence for our royalty, as well as a strongly fought-over piece of strategic land. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I get a small piece of personal reflected glory from all of this. My direct ancestor, Richard Shuttborough, was knighted by the first King Charles on the battlefield of Edge Hill in 1642. And his son John, also a direct ancestor of mine, was given a baronetcy, that's a promotion by the way, by Charles II on the restoration of the monarchy around 20 years later. Now, I'm not hinting or anything, Your Majesty, but, you know, continuity is often a good thing. I'm only saying. Anyway, we filmed a piece about the royal influence in the Cotswolds for Queen Elizabeth's Jubilee, which some of you will certainly have seen, but we thought we would put together a short edited version of that film for your pleasure to mark this very exciting occasion of the coronation of our new King, Charles III. I hope you enjoy it. In the year 410, the Romans retreated from this island. Britannia had always been a tricky outpost to the Roman Empire, often more trouble than it was worth, and now they were under threat in Rome itself, making it a luxury they could no longer afford. This left it open to invasion by the Angles and Saxons, who wasted no time. Various kingdoms were formed in the middle of the first millennium, but by 700 AD, the kings of Mercia had established themselves as the dominant rulers, based, it won't surprise you to hear, in the Cotswolds at Winchcombe. And by about 825 AD, all the kingdoms of Britannia had amalgamated under Mercian leadership. The aforementioned Alfred the Great, he of supposedly white horse fame, came to the throne in 849 AD and was to become one of the greatest leaders of the time. He fought off attacks from the Danes, culminating in a near-decisive victory at Edington in Wiltshire. When the constant battles between the Danes and the English finally came completely to an end, it was the kings of Wessex, once again part of the Cotswolds, who became dominant, and in 1042 the latest of them, Edward the Confessor, became king of all England. Imprinted on all school children's minds, the date of 1066 marked a complete change in the way of life in England, to reflect French rather than Danish influence. Edward the Confessor's son Harold was killed during the invasion, and William the Conqueror took control. He used his gift of land and property to build a highly supportive network of favoured noble families throughout the country, from whom he expected and received largely unquestioning support. This started a tradition of noble support for the monarchy that has continued uninterrupted, apart from a brief glitch in the English interregnum after the Civil War, and of course the odd exception. There are some key royal connections in the Cotswold Hills throughout the next 1,000 years. Here we are at Blenheim Palace. This estate has been a royal palace since time immemorial, but Elizabeth I had an unfortunate experience here. After her stint in the Tower of London, she was brought here for an entire year and imprisoned in the lodge house of the old palace, which was on the hill just behind me. Her sister Mary was almost paranoid that Elizabeth was plotting to overthrow her. It's probably not true, and certainly Elizabeth denied it, witnessed by the message she scratched in the window of the room in which she was imprisoned, which reads, "Much suspected of me, nothing proved can be, quoth Elizabeth, prisoner." The old palace at Blenheim is long gone, demolished by the first Duke of Marlborough, or at least by his wife, so that it didn't interrupt the view from the new palace which now sits so heavily in the countryside. When Mary died, childless, probably of ovarian cancer, in 1558, Elizabeth came to the throne, and so started the first Elizabethan age. Elizabeth was famous for what were referred to as her processions. She understood the value of being seen by her subjects all over the country. She used the loyal, noble families everywhere to put her up and look after her in her travels. Now this sounds exciting, but it became something many of her noblemen dreaded. She travelled, like all queens should, with an enormous entourage. Her hosts were expected to foot the bill in its entirety, to feed, house, and royally entertain the company. In many cases it brought them close to ruin. There were some in the Cotswolds who tried hard to avoid a visit, but she was insistent. Along with privilege comes responsibility. No king or queen since Elizabeth I has used her noble families quite so brazenly, and it might be reasonable to think that after the acquisition by Queen Victoria of estates in Norfolk and Scotland, there would be no reason for any of them to do so, but circumstances have arisen, even in the 20th century. So here we are, outside the spectacular house of Badminton. We've been very kindly given permission to film here. It's not somewhere you normally have access to. We're standing on the grounds where the Badminton horse trials are held. This house was perhaps the last of the houses to look after a member of the royal family for any extended period of time. I will tell you the story. The queen in question was Mary, widow of George V. Born Princess Mary of Teck on May 26, 1867, at Kensington Palace in London. Her mother, Princess Adelaide of Cambridge, was a granddaughter of King George III and a cousin of Queen Victoria. Her father, Duke Francis of Teck, was the son of Duke Alexander of Württemberg, an area which is now called Baden-Württemberg in southwest Germany. Mary married Queen Victoria's grandson, Prince George, Duke of York, in 1893. Known for her love of art and culture and her dedication to her role as Queen Consort, Mary oversaw some of the biggest upheavals in the history of the royal family, including the abdication of her son Edward VIII, who, much to her disapproval, gave up the throne to marry American divorcee Wallis Simpson. It was that decision that led to Queen Elizabeth's father, King George VI, becoming king, and ultimately to his daughter's position as Queen Elizabeth II. During the Second World War, Queen Mary's son, King George VI, was extremely concerned for her safety in London, so they needed somewhere for her to stay in the countryside. They decided her niece had the perfect spot. Now, many of us will have experienced the arrival of an elderly relative to stay for a while during a time of difficulty. Usually, we welcome the opportunity to help. But if your relative comes with an entire village full of attendants and followers, and then stays for 4 years, even the most saintly of us might begin to pall slightly. But that is what happened in Badminton. When the Duchess of Beaufort, who was Queen Mary's niece, was asked in which part of the great house the Queen had resided, she responded, "She lived in all of it." However hard I try, I can find no record of any other complaint. Now that, people, is style with a capital S. The current Duke and Duchess have recently opened the gardens of this magnificent house on a few days a year for all of us to look around. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I strongly suggest you have a look at their website, badmintonestate.com. to find out the days and grab the chance to see, at least from the outside, one of the most spectacular country houses in the country. I do hope you enjoyed this film, and we hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Certainly those of you who took the opportunity to celebrate the extraordinary traditions and history of England, so inextricably bound up in the coronation process. But perhaps more importantly, those of you who, from all over the world, who were kind enough to watch our channel, who I hope will look on us with a general feeling of affection for our determination to hang on to the medieval traditions that have helped us to survive through the many centuries. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. And we will see you again in the very near future, somewhere else in the Cotswolds.